Okay, now we are live again. Thanks for the quick patience here. And as promised, I'm not alone on this stage here. I actually have Paul with me from Sheridan Group. He is the Executive VP for Strategic Solutions and former president of the company. But I think what's even more important for everyone here, Paul is taking care of the whole EUDR project at Sheridan. And again, I think a few minutes ago, I told you we wanted to have, let's say, the company perspective on the whole EUDR topic in this conference as well. And Paul is going to provide it. And obviously, all of you guys have done this as well. A lot of discussions in the chat. Again, we will answer all of the questions. For this session, we will do like a panel, but it will be more like an interview, but feel more than welcome to ask Paul any question you have. I would advise you make it more about how Sheridan is preparing rather than the EUDR itself or TradeAware. We can cover that in the next session. But with that being said, welcome on stage, Paul.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I think it would be good if you could maybe give the audience a bit more context, A, on yourself, but B, obviously, then on the Sheridan Group, and especially how you are affected by the EUDR.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. Just a little bit of background on Sheridan. Sheridan is a printer in the United States. We have 12 facilities across the country. We print largely books and periodicals. So books, periodicals, and catalogs, but I would say the books and the periodicals are the products that have the greatest relevance to the EUDR regulation. We have both European customers, but largely, as you would imagine, US customers. And many of the products that we produce on behalf of our customers will find their way to the EU. So we might have a print run, let's say, of some number of thousands, but a small portion of that run will be coming to the EU. And that's, of course, the basis of our interest in helping our customers be compliant.
Yeah, makes sense. And then maybe to kind of give the audience a feeling of when you started and how you started your, let's say, EUDR journey. Maybe you can guide us through a bit, like when did the EUDR first land on your radar, and what was kind of your initial reaction to it as well?
Yeah. So, of course, being in the US, we're into this 1 degree of separation from the EU. And I would say it really came on the radar last year. And I think, like many, we immediately felt like we were too late. We were grateful for the extension that was provided, and then really set out to be more aggressive about sorting out the compliance. I think there was, the immediate reaction was just awe in terms of the comprehensiveness of this regulation and the extent of the requirements. And so it was a little overwhelming at first, but we then had to just roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, it's probably how a lot of companies out there feel. And I mean, I myself, I'm quite new to LiveEO, so I felt a bit overwhelmed when I started digging into the topic. So I can definitely relate to it, I would say. But then you already said you were kind of like just digging into it because you had to. Maybe to give the audience a bit of context there as well, who was or still is responsible for preparing for the EUDR? Like, do you have a separate department? Maybe you can give some examples there. Who has ownership basically at Sheridan?
Right. So the raw material in question is paper, which is, of course, a wood product, ultimately wood fiber. And so the investigation into EUDR started in our sourcing and procurement department. So they initiated discussions with the mills and started to attend a seminar here or there and read up as much as possible. And then then it of course filtered in through the sales channel. So customers started to ask us about how we would be helping them to be compliant, and so the sales and the sourcing departments were the first departments that were most immediately involved, and then we created a task force that ultimately included technology and legal as well, so that we would have a comprehensive review of the project.
Yeah, makes sense again. And then, so you said you created a task force, right? Was it hard to set it up? Because I can imagine that these people within the task force, they have other jobs to do, right? How did you manage to make sure that this is kind of a business priority, considering all the other things you might need to do?
Yeah, as we all like to say, we had full-time jobs before we took this on. I was quite lucky because it actually coincided with my transition to retirement and semi-retirement. So I ended off my role as president, and was in a gap period where I was still full-time, and with the intent of doing project work and staying on as an advisor before going to a semi-retired part-time basis. So I had some time to do investigations and talk to companies and ask a lot of questions. And my colleagues just were really helpful in terms of committing some time that they didn't necessarily have, but just recognized that they had to put in order to accomplish what we've so far accomplished. And this is a journey. We're still in early stages, to be frank. I mean, and as I would imagine is true for many, there's a lot to be done. We have a plan, but there's a lot to be done to check all the boxes.
But I mean, it's good that you're having the plan in the first place, right? I think Piero mentioned it as well, that this is quite important, and that basically the best time to start preparing is yesterday, and the second best is kind of today as well. Maybe one last question about let's say your internal setup. So did you do, let's say, any trainings on EUDR? Did you kind of where did you gather the knowledge? Like, how did the people prepare? Obviously, probably this today is kind of a knowledge source, right? But maybe again you have some helpful tips for the audience.
Yeah, there were really a number of sources. I mean, we started by reading the regulation itself, and then of course the FAQs as they came out, and so that was, let's say, the primary source. And then we had quite a number of discussions with our suppliers, which would be paper mills, and then also with our customers. And we learned some from them, they learned some from us. And then I think where the majority of our learning came from was our interviewing a number of the software platforms like Live.io, who were very much in the business of knowing in great detail what compliance means in the EUDR world. So we interviewed a number of different companies that were in that business, are in that business, and had an extensive set of questions for those companies, and that proved to be a really helpful way to expedite our learning curve. And then we internally started to do little sessions with our sales team and that sort of thing to make them aware of these requirements, and so that they could in turn stimulate discussions with our customers. And I can certainly speak more to how we then engage further with our suppliers to make certain that they would be ready, and that's an ongoing process.
Yeah, definitely makes sense as well. Maybe going a bit more into, let's say, the EUDR itself. Can you tell us maybe? I mean, you've already said it was very overwhelming in the beginning, but when you dig deeper into what were kind of the biggest challenges you faced, or maybe even you're still facing there?
Yeah, I think, one of the first challenges, in reading the regulation was to understand what our role in the process was. And of course, when you later understand it better, it seems more obvious. But when we were initially reading the documents and talking to people, we thought, well, are we a trader? Are we an operator? What are we? Well, it turns out we're none of the above. I mean, we're a non-EU entity, a supplier, and we're essentially conveying information from our suppliers and providing it to our customers. It's more complex than that because our products are typically made up of multiple types of paper, which may come from multiple suppliers. So each supplier will give us the information about a specific paper type. But when we produce, let's say, a book, there may be 3 or 4 paper types in that book. And then our role is to associate that print run with the multiple paper types and the specific paper batches that were used in that print run, and to then concatenate all that information into a single DDS that we can provide to our customer. So role was one of the immediate issues. The second issue is access to traces NT. Initially, we thought, oh, great, okay, we'll get this DDS. That will be already a significant hurdle. But once we figured that all out, we'll have to go to this traces NT system and submit this DDS so that we can get reference numbers. Well, that was a short-lived fantasy because we learned that as a non-EU entity, we had no business with traces NT. That's an issue we're still sorting out to see, is there a way that we can create a subsidiary in Europe or do something along those lines to allow us to, on behalf of our customers, submit these DDSs. But that's been a significant issue for us, and one that we're still working on resolving. And then I would say, we're only as good as the information we get from our suppliers. So that is a major issue for us, is that there was nobody who was immediately ready to do this. We do access some paper from European mills, and they have, as you would imagine, been the most prepared. And those are the only instances where we have mills that have suggested they could, as soon as July, start to actually give us reference numbers. But the US mills understandably are saying, oh, gosh, let me assess whether I want to do this. Do I have enough work that will ultimately go to the EU that it's worth putting a program together? And then even if they have the willingness to do it, is it technically possible for them to do it? And they have, in some instances, they are the landowners for the areas that are being harvested, and those are the easiest scenarios. There are other situations where they're working with hundreds, if not thousands, of small woodlot owners, and that's a very complex environment for them to navigate. And then one of the tougher issues is that they're buying a lot of byproducts from other production processes that involve wood, so sawdust and the cuts from lumber yards and that sort of thing, and that becomes sort of a silo of a mixed product that they have to trace back or eliminate from their production, and thereby make their product more expensive. So we've had to do a lot of work with the suppliers to understand what their issues are and to understand what their timelines are. And then, frankly, at some point, we have to assess, is it a feasible plan at this particular paper mill? And can we be confident that that will be compliant paper?
Yeah, big challenges, and I would love to dive deeper into it. And I've seen questions from the audience here as well. Maybe considering again the subsidiary. What is your? So you said you're kind of considering on doing it. Do you have an opinion there? Is it something you're probably going to do or not, or you just really is it just on the table and you're thinking about the EU entity?
It's just on the table at this point. We need to assess various questions of liability, not only within the scheme of EUDR, which I think there's some pretty good answers to if we were in the authorized representative position, but also just questions of what does it mean to have an EU entity. And there are lots of administrative pieces to that. So it's a fairly complex undertaking and something that we need to think hard about.
Yeah, fair enough. And then obviously you mentioned the suppliers as well and things that you have already like discussed with them. Maybe you can again guide us through a bit more like how can we imagine how did this kind of conversations happen? Did you have like a whole system in place already? Was it more like, okay, we just start talking to the biggest ones first, like what was kind of the approach here?
So I think, last year, as we were just getting started in this process, we had conversations with a number of the mills to understand where they were with their compliance efforts. Then going into this year, we undertook a process that was more comprehensive and set up a schedule to make certain we interviewed with the same questions every one of our suppliers, maintaining a good tracking mechanism to confirm where they were, and then to set up subsequent discussions with them so that we could track their progress. And it's been, really sort of a mutually beneficial conversation with our suppliers because we educate each other along the way, introduce each other to different resources that we've come across, and that sort of thing. And in some cases, the suppliers have been helpful in communicating with our customers as well.
Yeah, that again, that sounds quite good. Maybe moving a bit to let's say the business impact, so to say, of the EUDR, because again, there have been some questions from the audience as well. Would you say, apart from obviously the internal kind of resources that you would need to become compliant, did this affect like the way you're doing business already, or can you see it already that it will have an effect more on the business side of things?
Well, I mean, one business effect is that none of this is free, right? So there's a cost all the way through the supply chain to become compliant. I mean, I'd like to think that as time goes on, this will become more of a background information exchange that will be less onerous in a sense, and less costly. But it does have a cost. I think as I mentioned before, some of the suppliers, in order to be compliant, will need to source differently and will have more expensive sources of fiber, and that ultimately needs to be passed along. We also will be experiencing various expenses and both internal and external costs. So that has a very clear business effect. But on the positive side, we've decided to embrace this challenge and say, we want to be a leader in the compliance effort, so that we can help our customers. I mean, ultimately, that's I think an important premise is if we can solve our customers' problems, then hopefully we can create some advantage in our business environment. So we're working hard to put together solutions and to educate our customers, and to make certain that we can fulfill all those promises to help them to become compliant. And interestingly, a big part of that in the U.S. has been just creating awareness. We were quite surprised as we got more engaged in our efforts that we weren't getting more questions from our customers, because I think they simply were not aware. Again, we're thousands of miles away, and we have plenty of other things happening in the headlines. So EUDR has been filtering in, and so we're working to change that. We've sent out questionnaires to our customers to understand who among our customers will require compliance with EUDR. And then, of course, we have to map that to which paper stocks are they using, and and then go through a process of potentially working with them to change paper stocks to compliant sources. So all of that leads to a fair amount of discussions with customers, which tend to be positive events and or stimulate good relationships with them when we're looking out for their best interests.
Yeah, that would have been my second question here. Obviously, there are costs, right? But maybe there are opportunities as well. If you look at these talks you had with the customers, obviously there were positive effects, right? Do you have the feeling that, let's say, other suppliers are talking like this to customers as well? Because you've kind of mentioned that it was a bit unique, especially in the US, that you were kind of a first mover. But do you have the feeling that other suppliers or the market is doing this as well, or would you still say there is close to zero movement?
Yeah, I'm certainly aware that a number of printers are working on the solutions. I think we have a big footprint in the academic publishing sphere, and the academic publishing sphere has typically been dominated by European companies. And have a fair amount of distribution in the EU. So this has been particularly for us, an important issue. Whereas I can imagine that there are other printers for whom the distribution of their content to the EU might be very small or insignificant, and the cost benefit analysis looks different for them than it does for us. But this really affects a core component of our business, and we from our perspective, we needed to really put a lot of energy into it because of that. And hopefully, to your point, that creates some opportunity. I mean, if it could lead to some more consolidation of work if people find that this is sort of the easier route to get their work that needs to go to the EU.
Yeah, makes sense again. And I think this is probably true for other industries as well, right? And I can see that we have a lot of companies attending right now from the US, so this might be helpful to all of you. And well, let's maybe look into the future a bit more. And I think you've said it in the beginning as well. What is kind of still on your roadmap? You've mentioned it, I think, in the beginning, but maybe to kind of be a bit more practical here. What are your planned next steps, so to say? What are you going to solve next?
Yeah, well, the important step that we've taken has been to partner with Livio to establish this platform for the gathering of the information from our suppliers, the validation of that information, the storage, and the dissemination of that information either to our customers or ultimately directly into traces. So that coming to that conclusion it was sort of a milestone moment in the project, and now so a lot of what we have done up to this point has been planning, and the next stages are implementation stages where we're actually getting the data flow workflows in place, et cetera. So the next stages are the real work, I suppose. If we've made good plans, we'll have a good roadmap to get all that done.
Yeah, definitely. And to kind of, let's say, sum it up a bit, maybe you have like one final advice for the audience, and then we will hop into the questions that are actually coming from the audience. But what is kind of one advice you could give to all the people who are listening at the moment?
I would say don't be afraid to be a beginner. Ask questions. There are no stupid questions, so to speak. Everybody that I've spoken to, still has open questions about EUDR. There are still some things that are unresolved. So, I think we all have kind of a tendency to not want to talk about things unless we fully understand them. And actually, in this situation, you serve yourself well to ask as many questions as come to mind, and keep kind of peeling the onion. the scenarios are all quite different. So there's not a single answer. Even with this applies to cocoa and soy and palm and wood products. We have a very small niche that we're focused on of paper products, and yet within our customer base producing books and periodicals, there will be a number of different routes into the EU. There'll be a number of different definitions of who is the operator and who is the trader, who will be submitting this DDS. So there isn't just this simple answer out there, and it is complex. So I think finding the right people to provide you with those answers is a really critical, and ask all the questions that come to mind.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. At least that's what I did during my onboarding, right? And that's why we basically came up with the conference today as well, because we know there are still a lot of questions out there. And again, as you said, some of the questions still have to be answered by the EU itself. So that's definitely a good advice. And then I would because we've seen a lot of questions coming in, I would again kind of cherry pick some of them. And one of the subjects we actually touched this morning, but there was a question about if Sheridan is either PEFC or FSC certified. And if so, did it help you guys with becoming compliant?
Yes, so we work hand in hand with FSC and SFI, and that and this question comes up a lot. Frankly, it was my first question. Like, doesn't that just solve it? Isn't that just the answer? And I was quite shocked to find out that was not the answer. It's a part of the answer. It's certainly validating information, but it doesn't provide all of the elements that are required in the DDS. You need geolocation, you need specific legality information, you need specific species information. It's more of a general kind of imprimatur for good forestry practices, and that providing that information, I think, will be very helpful to the ultimate success and compliance. But it isn't the full answer. And I do know, just to be clear, I think both, many of those organizations are looking at how they can be a more complete solution, but that takes a good deal of time and effort to get to that point.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was kind of the answer that Rob from PEFC earlier on gave as well. So bottom line, it helps, but it's not enough. And then another question, maybe more about your suppliers. I will actually show it on stage because it's a bit longer and it's easier. But as you can see, so when engaging with paper molds, are there already? What is your experience as to them sharing EUDR relevant information? How are you engaging with them? Are you including EUDR requirements into contractual terms with mills as well?
So we haven't gone the contractual route at this point. We have simply been sharing with the mills our understanding of what the requirements are, and validating that they understand it the same way. As I've noted before, we've a little bit been on the learning curve together with particularly the U.S. mills. We haven't seen resistance to the sharing of geolocation information so much as just more the practical and logistical questions of how to capture that information.
Yeah, I think that should answer the question. And I think then we have kind of another question, which is then the other way around, right? But then as a company established in the US, how are you planning to provide your customers with the relevant geolocation data? Did you register for an EORI number to get access to traces? I think we've touched it again in the beginning. But
we did touch on this in a moment. That at this point, I would say what I know we will do is provide the DDS, which of course we have to put together with all the different components of a specific product. based on the information that we have received from the various suppliers. And we, through LiveEO, will be providing that information to our customers either via a portal or via an API. If they're in a high transaction environment, they might likely will want to use an API. And then it's typically it will be a downstream responsibility to enter that into traces. As I noted, we're looking at, is there a way that we can shortcut that and get to a reference number earlier in the process, but as yet haven't defined what that answer would be.
Yeah, I will mark it as answered. Oh, nice. And then let me quickly check. Sorry, there were a few questions that are basically the same. Sorry, there was one I wanted to ask. Where is it again? Yeah, so maybe you can, and I mean, again, you've said it, but this is more about the, let's say, selection process of software solution. Obviously, this is not only true probably for TradeAware, but maybe you can answer this question as well. Like, how did you test kind of the software? How was your process there?
Yeah, that process so far has been lots of demonstrations, lots of technical questions. We did interview a number of different service providers in that process. And I think it's, in a sense, it's difficult because there isn't a lot of data flow. We don't have DDSs from our suppliers yet to put into the system. So we're all sorting through this in a somewhat theoretical fashion until we can get enough data to do the sort of testing that I think they're suggesting here. So we expect in the following months that all of that will be happening, and then start to happen at scale as we get into the final quarter of the year.
Yeah, that sounds good as well. And then I would slowly come to an end here, actually, by reading one of the comments, because I think it sums up this session perfectly. So Mireia said, very interesting to hear Paul's journey to EUDR compliance with a product that I find has landed you a very complex scenario. Good luck in the future when your books are reaching the EU. So I think these are some nice words. Obviously, there is not only luck involved, right, but a proper roadmap. So I think you don't only rely on luck here, so to say. But again, I think it showed the value of this session. And thank you so much for answering a lot of questions here. Again, some of them we will push to the next session because Chris is presenting LiveEO, and there were obviously a lot more detailed questions on our software solution. So stay tuned. But again, thank you so much for being on stage. And yeah, that's it for this session.
It's been a pleasure, Patrick. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure. And then, as always, I will end the session, and you guys will see me in a minute in the next one.